You know what I like about this episode?
What?
Makes a lot of sense.
And nickels and dimes and dollars?
Absolutely. It's all about big digital change.
Really?
Come on, let's buck the system.
No, really, stop it.
I'm Adam Kaplan.
And I'm Shobhita Sharma. And if you haven't figured out already, this episode of Towards London is about fintech. And no, Adam, this does not mean technology from Finland.
I was not going to say that. Fintech is short for financial technology, and we're going to hear about how the most risk-averse institutions in Canada are using 21st century methods to innovate while making sure your money is safe.
And we're going to hear from dorm room friends who got together and hatched an idea that led them to rethink payment processing. You know, your credit cards and debit cards. And they did it in a way that made them one of Canada's fastest growing companies.
And finally, we're going to crack the nut on bitcoins and find out how so-called taboo technologies are changing the very nature of money. Shobhita, it's suddenly got a lot colder around here, and clearly you have done some shopping to pick up some boots. You get those recently?
Yeah, they are new, and I bought them online. And just as I was buying these gorgeous boots, I couldn't help but think about how much consumers' purchasing abilities have changed because of technology. Like, I bought these boots online and paid for them online, totally cashless.
Just like Shobhita's boots, there are countless purchases being made possible both online and offline by payment processing companies around the globe. But Shobhita, if payment processing companies are so common, how would one innovate?
Well, it sort of helps if you don't start off in fintech and instead in an industry that you can take a bite out of.
I was born in Africa, in Libya actually. And 2003, my family immigrated to Canada. I went to Western first, software engineering. I dropped out after 3 years. We started a business, it was an online food court. We sold it. And then we started Zomaron, the payments company, out of a need from everything we experienced with the first company that we sold, based on how hard and how difficult it was for entrepreneurs to be up and running with payments. And we're talking back in 2006 to 2009.
That's Tarique Al-Ansari from Zomaron, a national payment processing company that, despite its youth, is playing in the same sandbox as the big guys.
In 2006, Facebook was just in its infancy, and the iPhone was still a few years away from changing the way we communicate. Online purchases, especially ordering food online, was still an alien concept, and so was online payment processing.
And let's add another layer of complications. Tarique's customers were, well, exactly who you would think would order food online. They were college and university students, and they often didn't have credit cards. And if they did, they didn't like to use them because their limits were so low.
That business, we decided to go cashless. And we were one of very few websites in Canada at the time to implement Interac Online. And it's funny, one of the major banks in Canada was not part of Interac Online. And we had students emailing us saying, I switched to this other bank because my bank is not part of Interac Online. That's how much they loved it.
And so Tarique and his partner sold their food ordering business, and Zomaron was born.
They quickly added Visa and MasterCard through a sponsor bank in the US, and then started signing up customers. Basically, people who needed to accept debit cards and credit cards.
We started just, going to all the friends and family first, and then it went from there. And now we've been one of the fastest growing companies in Canada for the past few years, making it on Profit 500 list.
And to put this accomplishment into perspective, Tarique told us that 80% of payment processing in Canada is controlled by the major banks. So how does a payment processing company, something that's really not that uncommon, go from signing up friends and family to being on the Profit 500 list?
For the people who are in the fintech space, they know that fintechs are actually enablers, and they're not competitors with the banks, and they're not a threat to the banks. And the banks realize this really well. That's why they partner with a lot of fintechs. We do not take deposits, and that's their bread and butter, right? So where we are just focusing on certain niches, we are enabling certain industries or certain market verticals where we see the banks are not playing in, for example. After a while, we found out that we gained certain penetration in certain markets, and we have a significant market share in things like in the medical industry and charities and the auto industry. And we were like, wait a second, we know this market. We are sizable, I wouldn't say significant, but we're a sizable player in that market. We have good network and a lot of merchants that are actually our customers that love us, that process in that market. Why don't we think of payments from a different perspective?
Shobhita, how do you think differently about payment processing? I sort of feel like that's trying to create a whole new peanut butter and jelly sandwich using bread, peanut butter, and jelly. It's the same result, it's just said differently.
I like the analogy, but I'll let Tarique explain.
So everybody in the payments industry thinks of payments as transactions and pennies and cents and dollars and basis points. If you put that on the side for a second and start thinking every transaction that shows up on my system is a user interaction, is a user experience that happened at my merchant and their customer. So if I'm processing money, payments for a car dealer, I shouldn't think of the transaction as a payment transaction between the car dealer and myself. We started thinking of the user experience of that car dealer and their customer that walks into the dealer, and how can we enhance that user interaction. If you start thinking of their user experience and any pain points that you have, how you can improve their user experience, that's when you win big.
You know what? I'm thinking about how much easier things have become now. Like, you can order a vehicle for hire online. You can order coffee with an app.
Well, it is the age of the consumer, and convenience is key.
This whole new term, the on-demand economy, like Uber or the Starbucks app, there is a lot of other value adds that they're providing to the consumer and to the partner, it be a charity or a taxi industry or the hospitality industry, whichever industry, because it first comes out of a need for convenience, but then you add everything else that you can add to it.
So I thought the financial industry in Canada was super regulated. How can a fintech innovate with that much regulation?
Well, Tarique said that the level of regulation is actually a benefit to fintech innovators, not just here in Canada, but globally. In his mind, it's the job of the innovator and the entrepreneur to solve the problems that people have in a way that's valuable to the customers. And it needs to work 100% of the time, every single time.
The fact that a lot of the processes in the financial industry has a lot of manual pieces to it, that allows you as an innovator, as a fintech, to actually be able to introduce something different and win a market share. So with these manual processes, when you look at them, they're not put there by design. I would say it comes down to user experience. It's not about where you innovate, it's how you innovate. So a lot of it is the idea and then the execution behind the idea. So if you provide a killer user experience, by killer I mean a 10 out of 10 user experience, something different than what I'm used to, people will come and they will buy your service, they will use it. So it's not which kind of fintech space to be in, but it's what user experience you provide, what you build in that user experience, and how do you solve a problem.
Now, the financial industry in Canada, well, it's not really changing, even though there is an opportunity to.
Canada sits on top of the world with tech, with innovation, with education, we're leading the world with that stuff. And in the same sense with tech, you're going to see this other shift and we have to, as Canadians, being as bright as we are, with the Canadian quality that we can produce to the world, we actually have to offer and invest as a government and as business owners into the next era of the human being living experience, to actually be able to build something that you can export to the rest of the world and lead the world with that innovation.
We'll put all the relevant links at towardslondon.com, including Zomaron's website and Twitter, plus Tarique's account, which may compel him to post something.